What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and we are continuing our 2022 schedule preview projected record series here with Penn State. If you're a Penn State fan, subscribe to our Penn State channel at the Voice of College Football. I'll put a link in the description. Also, you'll see a card pop up here on the screen. Help us out. Help us to build that Penn State channel. But in this video, again, we're going to preview the schedule and also give you an early projected record for the upcoming 2022 season for Penn State. Before we get into 2022, let's look back at 2021. This is the schedule for 2021 for Penn State, and you can see in the non-conference, of course, they played Auburn, won that game at home. They had it rolling early on, 5-0, but then ran into a tough game against Iowa, and then you had Illinois, Ohio State, Michigan State, 5 tough losses. That Illinois loss was a brutal one. I mean, that was one that Penn State really should have won. But you look at the schedule here out of the West. Yes, they had to play Iowa, the top team out of the West. That was a tough draw there. Illinois wound up tripping them up, even though they were not one of the top teams out of the West. And they played Wisconsin, so a really tough schedule having both Wisconsin and Iowa on the road out of the West, and then also playing Auburn in the non-conference. So yes, this was a very, very tough schedule. And it wound up putting Penn State there at 7-5. Let's look ahead at 2022. This is the schedule. Before we go game by game, let's take a look at who Penn State plays outside of the division, because we know, of course, that Penn State will play every Big Ten East team. So in the non-conference, they'll play Ohio and Central Michigan. Should be pretty easy wins there. But then they'll play Auburn on the road in what should be a huge non-conference matchup. The game was really good last year at Penn State. This time it's at Auburn. Both teams come into this year with, potential to be pretty good and also a lot of question marks. So that's going to be a really intriguing matchup there in another big non-conference one. We have several big non-conference games this year. But who do they play out of the West? Well, they get a pretty good draw this year. They get Purdue on the road, but then they get Northwestern and Minnesota. So you don't have to play Wisconsin, don't have to play Iowa, don't have to play Nebraska, who could be a sneaky good team out of the West this year after losing all those close games last season. Purdue on the road will be tough. Minnesota will be a good team. So it's not necessarily, not saying it's an easy draw out of the West, but it's probably about who you'd want to have to face here. You want to play Northwestern, and you don't want to play Wisconsin, Iowa, and Nebraska, in my opinion. Purdue and Minnesota, both teams that are capable of being pretty good, but both teams that, Penn State should probably be the better team. It's hard to say it, it's so early right now, but those are, I think, a favorable draw out of the West with Purdue, Northwestern, and Minnesota. So let's get to the schedule here. They open up with Purdue on September the 3rd on the road. So that is a tough game there, playing in the first game of the year on the road. We'll see if Penn State can win that one. That will really set the tone for the season. You've got to find a way to get a win there. A Purdue team that should be pretty good this year, but a game that Penn State can absolutely win. And then you have Ohio after that, and then it's on the road at Auburn on September 17th. Huge game like I talked about in the non-conference, and then Central Michigan on September the 24th. So you've got 2 easy wins there in September, but then 2 tough road games, Purdue and Auburn. They're tough, but they're winnable. Penn State has a chance to start 4-0, but they also have a chance to start 2-2. So that'll be really key. I know they got off to a great start last year, and it wound up, it didn't go that great. But if they can start off 4-0 with this schedule and what they have the rest of the way, I think they're going to finish much stronger this season. Going into the month of October, they start off with Northwestern, a game that they should be able to win. And then you have a tough stretch here with Michigan on the road, then Minnesota, and then Ohio State. Michigan on the road after a bye week. That'll be a huge game in the Big Ten East. I think that could be a separator. It could be a game that, where the loser maybe gets knocked out of the race. We don't know how good everyone's going to be, but if Michigan does drop off some this year and Penn State wins that game, Michigan, they might kind of get knocked off, and Penn State will be the team that's still fighting for a chance to win the East. I think Ohio State's going to be the favorite, but Penn State, the schedule sets up pretty well for them. It gives them a chance. Minnesota after that at home, and then Ohio State on October 29th. They get them at home. They played them tough last year on the road. We'll see what they can do at home this year. And then it's Indiana after that on November the 5th. On the road, Indiana, a team that disappointed this past season, but should be improved, I would think. And then Maryland, and then at Rutgers. So a pretty easy month of November, at least the first part of that, with Indiana, Maryland, and Rutgers. And then they close out with Michigan State. They get them at home as well, so that's a game that Penn State's probably going to be favored in. So it comes down to the start of the season with Purdue and Auburn on the road. If they can win those two games, Penn State's going to be in the conversation in the Big Ten East. If they lose one or two of those games, which the Auburn game is really not going to affect the standings, but still, just from a confidence standpoint, you really need to, if you're going to have a chance to go all the way and win this division, you're probably going to need to win both of those games. Just to build that confidence and believe that they could beat Michigan. But even if they lose to Michigan, they do get Ohio State and Michigan State at home. So if they win those two games, there's still a path for them. But I think that Purdue game is just going to be key when we're talking about the standings in the Big Ten and having a chance. That Purdue game, I don't know that Penn State can beat Michigan on the road and also beat Ohio State and also beat Michigan State. It's going to be tough. It's just going to be tough to win all of those games. So if you lose to Purdue, it's going to be tough to get there with one loss. But if you can beat Purdue and finish with just one loss in the Big Ten East, I think it gives you a great shot to win that division. So looking at this schedule again, it sets up pretty well. Their draw out of the West is not bad. They get two of their three big games in the East at home. And because of that, I think Penn State has to be considered a team that at least has a shot in the Big Ten East in 2022. Here are the projections from 2021. You see Penn State finishing 7-5. The projection was 8-4. I actually predicted them to go 9-3, so I was higher on this team. I really liked how they finished the 2020 season with some close losses in there, some bad losses. Look at the Illinois game. Really kept them from getting to 8-4, 9-3 as they finished at 7-5. FBI liked this team as well. Had them at 8.6 and 3.6. A lot of people thought that this was maybe the team that had the best shot at taking down Ohio State in the Big Ten East. Not Michigan, but actually Penn State. Didn't work out that way, obviously. The over-under was also at 9, so Vegas thought that this was an 8-4, 9-3 type team. And again, just didn't live up to that. So we're going to give you our projection now. This is not a prediction. And going back to last year, the projection that we did when we just average out these numbers like I'm about to do here was better than my personal prediction. So we'll see if it turns out that way again. But this is simply a projection based off of the schedule, how tough the schedule is, and how good we expect each team to be this upcoming season. So here's the schedule again. This is the scale that we will be using. You see you're less than 20%, you're over 80%. Those are games that are almost guaranteed wins, games where the spread's going to be more than 2 touchdowns. Your 20 to 29 and 71 to 80% games, those are games where I think the spread will be 10 to 14 points. A team is a clear favorite, but not a huge favorite. And then 30 to 39, 61 to 70%, those are games where I think teams going to be favored by about a touchdown, 6, 7, 8 points, somewhere in that range. And then your 50-50 games between 40 and 60%, those are games where I think the spread will be 3 or 4 points or less, games that really could go either way. So we start with the easy wins, of course. You got 2 of those, Ohio State and Central Michigan. 2 teams out of the MAC. Penn State should not have any real trouble with either one of these teams. Of course, you never know. It's college football, but we expect Penn State to be favored by, 14 plus, probably closer to 20 in both of these games. They should win both matchups. And then I think you've got 4 games in the blue here, your 71 to 80% games. I think Penn State will be double-digit favorites against Northwestern on the road at Indiana, Maryland, and on the road at Rutgers. Maryland's a little tricky. I was close to putting them in the purple. I think Maryland's going to be a pretty good team this year. Home field advantage, that was the difference. If this game was at Maryland, that game would be in the purple. But because it's at home, I'm going to go with Penn State in the blue. I think they'll be favored by about 10. So that was closer to 70%, whereas Northwestern, Indiana, Rutgers, maybe those are closer to 80%. Although with Indiana and Rutgers on the road, maybe all of these games are really closer to 70% than they are 80%. And then we go to the purple. We have 1 game in the purple, Minnesota. I think Penn State will be favored by about a touchdown in this game. Minnesota figures to be a contender in the Big Ten West, but home field advantage ultimately keeps this game in the purple. If this game was at Minnesota, then I'd probably have this as a 50-50 game. But playing at home gives Penn State enough of an advantage to where I think we can say that they will be favored by 6 or 7 points in this one. And then we've got a couple of games where they're going to be, I think, pretty clear underdogs. That's on the road at Michigan, and it's Ohio State. I think they will be About a touchdown underdog in both games. Ohio State, of course, we know with the hype that they have coming into the season. And then you've got Michigan there on the road, a team that just went to the college football playoff. Michigan may drop off some, but playing them on the road, I still think that gives Michigan an advantage and probably makes them about a touchdown favorite. Not saying that Michigan and Ohio State are going to win. Again, we're just looking at the odds here, and I think both of those games probably belong in the yellow. And then that leaves you with 3 50-50 games. You got Purdue on the road, Auburn on the road, and Michigan State. I think Purdue and Auburn, if they were at home, they'd probably be in the purple. So it's kind of like what I said with Minnesota, because that's a home game. It's in the purple. If it was on the road, it'd be a 50-50 game. I think the same holds true with Purdue and Auburn. Playing them on the road makes it a little bit tougher for Penn State. I think if you play on a neutral field, Penn State probably favored in those matchups, but playing on the road definitely makes it a close call. Games that could go either way. And then Michigan State at the end of the season, getting them at home, I think, will really benefit Penn State. Michigan State's going to be ranked probably higher than Penn State coming into the season. Probably would be favored in that game if it was at Michigan State. Might still be favored in that game, but I think it'll be a small enough number to where we can call that a 50-50 game. So what we do, we take these green games, we count them as wins. We don't have any reds, so we don't have to count any losses. And then we average everything out. 20 to 25, we don't have any of those. 30 to 35, 39% games, I do 35%. The games in purple, 65%, blue, 75%, and 50-50 for the games in white. Just to kind of give you a projection. What should Penn State be looking at in 2022? What would make it for a successful season? And I think if they go over the projection, it is a successful season, but the projection is 8-4. So same projection that this team had last season. Going into last year, it was 8-4. They finished 7-5. Expectations from a lot of people were higher than that. Again, they fell below the projection. This year, once again, it's 8-4. But I think there are a lot of opportunities. They're going to be favored in a lot of games. A couple of tricky road games there with Purdue and Auburn. So I could easily see this team going 8-4. I could see them going 9-3. I think 10-2 might be tough because if you lose to Michigan and Ohio State, winning all of the rest of these games, I think is going to be tough. When you've got Purdue on the road, when you've got Auburn on the road, you got a tough Michigan State team. I think 8-4 is a really fair projection. What do you guys think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Where would you project this team for 2022? Give me your thoughts down in the comments below.